Hey there, this is Dan, the producer for Mark and Carrie. If you like this show, we highly recommend you check out Watson's other podcast, Trending Globally. You'll hear more in-depth conversations about politics and policy from some of the world's leading experts, including, occasionally, Mark and Carrie. You can find us by subscribing to Trending Globally on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, that's Trending Globally. All right, on with the show. Thanks.
Hello everyone, it's the Mark and Carrie Show end of year, Christmas, New Year's, looking backwards, looking forward extravaganza. And we've got no script. Usually what we do is 24 hours before we'll put together a Google Doc and it'll be, I'll have on it Trump, Brexit, EU, vaccine, pandemic, right? And it hasn't changed for 9 months. And we were about to do that again and I thought, no, I can't do this. So we're going to try something new. I'm going to ask Carrie a question to get us started, and we're going to just see where this goes. Carrie, what is your abiding memory of 2020? If you 20 years from now, when you tell your children or grandchildren or great aunts or whatever it is about 2020, what is the abiding memory of 2020 going to be?
Well, I was in Oxford in the UK, staying in one of the college dorm rooms. I can't remember what the school was that I was staying at, and I was with Sam, my partner, and this is like maybe end of February, early March, and he says to me, "I think my office is going to shut down," and I'm like, "That's insane! I can't even imagine a world in which your office would shut down," and our big nod to the emerging COVID pandemic at that point was not to go to London and to stay in Oxford instead. And of course, we thought this was like really safe and like kind of crazy too to not go into London. And so I guess that's my memory of that. The world, I just couldn't imagine a world where things had shut down and offices were closed and people were working home and then working from home. And then I remember leaving my office on campus at the time and thinking that we're going to be gone for, a whole 2 weeks or something some insane amount of time like that. And here we are however many months later. So I think that's just the total shift in thinking about like just my daily life and everything connected to it, and that it shifted so quickly. And I just, in that moment, couldn't even imagine that it would move as quickly as it did. So right back at you.
So here's the follow-up question, because that's just the setup for the
Yeah.
other. How much do you think of what we knew before is going to come back? How much mean reversion is built into this? Or have things really changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the question. I mean, you talk to epidemiologists and public health people, and they're like, people say, we never could have predicted this. And they say, well, we did say that this was going to happen. We said, we've
Right.
been saying this was going to happen for a long time.
It's going to be two waves. The second one's going to be worse.
Yes.
Yeah, nobody listens.
Right, exactly. And so there's another one, there's another COVID happening that's going to happen. And are we going to be prepared for it in any way? And the answer to that is probably not. It's the Churchill quote, Americans will do the right thing after they've exhausted every other option. I mean, so you feel like we should be ready, but I don't. I mean, the cynical part of me says no. Will the infrastructure be any different? Probably not. Will our human reaction to things probably not. So I mean, this has been a big like experiment in doing everything the same once we go back to, if there's ever a return to normal.
So I had cause to look into a few things I didn't usually look at, trying to figure out whether we're going to go back to normal or not. What does that look like? And of course, one of the big casualties from this, which still gets reported as one of the big casualties, of course, is retail, right? So basically, Amazon's hired the 10 billion workers from different planets in order to meet demand. Slight exaggeration, but you know what I mean. And, the mall's dead. Nobody's going. Foot traffic's down, etc., etc. So the largest mall owner in the United States, called the Simon Property Group, I think that's their name. And the minute the vaccine was announced, their stock rebounded like you wouldn't believe. Right? And all the airlines that were completely trashed, they were down 40%. They
Yeah.
regained practically about 80% of their value in some cases. Now there's second wave fluctuations, etc., right? But it just tells me that we're going to try and get back to where we were as soon as possible. And then I tried to imagine, this is my abiding memory, I was trying to remember what it was like to be, for example, in a crowded pub.
Yes.
right? Like in a really busy restaurant, standing next to people who aren't wearing masks, lots of them, and not caring, right? So I wonder how much of the kind of the behavioural response has been encoded that, that is going to be weird. You're going to change fundamentally, or whether we're just going to wipe that out and just go back to exactly where we were before the minute we have some kind of, vaccine level of acceptable risk. I don't know. It's a tough one. I was thinking about. I used to fly all the time. I practically lived on planes, right? And I haven't done it for months and months and months. And at first, I was like, "Oh, thank God," right? Because airports are not fun places, and you get tired and you get older, and it's just crap traveling all the time. And I was like, "Oh, it's great." And now, basically, I'm like, "God, I'd really like to go somewhere." So I don't know,
Right.
I'm finding this a strange moment, this end of the year, because in a sense we've priced in the vaccine, we've priced in it's going to be over, etc. Forget about the next one coming down the line, right? But it's still months away, right? And we're going to go through a very long, hard winter. And we still have people denying the virus is a virus and various things like this, and pointing out the true statistic but drawing their own inference from it that there's basically been 400 people under the age of, I think it's something like 40 in Britain who have actually died of the virus, and this is all terrible, whatever. And yeah, but the correct inference to draw from this is like your economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of your healthcare system. And that's the sort of the fundamental lesson that we should have learned from this. If you blow up your healthcare system, you don't have an economy, and that's what this whole thing has been about and continues to be. So I don't know. I don't know how much we've changed. I'm in very philosophical mode this morning. I don't know why, but I'm trying to figure it out. In one sense, we're trying to get back to normal. We've still got a long way to go. And will it really be normal when we get there? I suppose that's the question I'm asking.
Well, and on the stock market point, I mean, you brought this up a few episodes back, and you said it really well. And now, of course, I can't remember it, but the stock market it measures emotions, and maybe versus like the what's going on the ground. I don't know. I probably just totally hacked it to death. But so I saw the same stuff about the stock market, and then I wonder, is that just like the anticipation of things
Right.
versus the reality of things? And what is there some other indicator out there, some other metric that we have that measures things in a better way? And I don't know what that is.
And at the same time, we do have the stimulus bill, as it's called. I hate that name, stimulus. It implies sort of like somebody's dead and you're trying to bring them back to life, right?
Yeah.
Or like a coffee. It's like, you need a coffee, have a stimulus, right? It should really just be called disaster insurance. Because if you don't support the economy when it's hit with something like this, you'll destroy about 40% of it. And then you'll have an even bigger hole and you'll end up even more in debt, right? So,
Yeah.
they put this thing through with all the bits in it that Trump didn't like and all that sort of stuff. And the last minute bullshit delays, etc. And it might be much bigger in terms of payments to people, etc., right? But stock markets, we're still this is a constant theme of 2020. The stock market's still roaring ahead, and millions of Americans are losing their benefits and their homes and their rentals and their futures.
Yeah.
And we seem to be systematically unable to get to grips with that. That divorce has run right through 2020, and it's kind of like a terrible thing we acknowledge and then move on.
Well, and I'm thinking, being more philosophical as well now. I mean, that was another thing that I've thought a lot about, is that COVID has torn off any of the thin veneer between what actually makes this country run. I mean, it's the people, it's the frontline workers in whatever way we define them, the people who deliver the takeout, the Uber drivers that California decided to not recognize as real employees, the delivery people, the people picking up our groceries in Instacart, that I'm able to outsource my risk to them, and
Hmm.
and they get very little benefits out of that, and that's what makes this country run. Like, it's not like Jamie Dimon and the other CEOs of fancy places. I mean, it's the people running around on the messenger bikes that are doing this.
No, absolutely. So let me ask another question then to move the conversation ahead. So, what's the defining news story for you? What's the thing that came up in the news that you go, yeah, that's 2020 for me?
I mean, this is where I think I think about things from the political science perspective, and that is about presidential power. And that doesn't have to do with the person in the office, it has to do with the office in general. And that is that we have increasingly, and this is like every podcast, probably I've said this in some way or another, that since the 1980s when Reagan comes after post Nixon, post Watergate, that we have seen a significant increase of presidential power, and that is presidents doing what they would like when they would like. And the presidential pardons are the most recent round of them are exactly that. The president, there usually is a protocol, but the president can pardon whoever he wants, and the president just did that, and people are grousing about it. But the president has done that, and we've set it up. Congress has set it up. American voters have set it up so that the president can do that. And so, we can, and I have toss and turn and yell about all the bad things that President Trump has done. But institutionally, that's the way it happens. And no president, Joe Biden is not going to step into office and say, oh, I don't want this stuff anymore. Like, give all that stuff back to Congress. He's going to continue to grow that until Congress or the Supreme Court starts to eat away at that.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I was thinking about this before we came on. I was thinking, well, what are the stories that did it for me? And it's really right at the end of the year. It's two things that happened around the election. And I think we spoke about one of them at least, but maybe not the other one. And they both happened in California. So the first one you alluded to was that basically Uber and a bunch of other firms got together and for the cost of $200 million in advertising, got to write the labor law of California, which is basically on its own a G7 economy. So, I mean, if you want to talk about presidential power, let's think about corporate power, right? They basically said, hey, what labor law would we really like? Let's go write it, and then let's tell everybody it's awesome toast, and then we'll chuck loads of money at it, and then we'll do a proposition, and we'll basically get what we want. And, this is hugely significant in terms of inequality, fragilization of people's lives, benefits, etc., etc. This is really bad precedent for the labor market right across the board. And the Democrats are absolutely silent on it. Absolutely silent about it, right? And the second one that they're silent about also happened in California, and we haven't spoken about this. I want your take on this. What happened with the affirmative action proposition in California at the time of the election?
I didn't pay any attention to this, so this says
You didn't
a lot.
pay any attention to this, did you? No. California voters, right? Basically, as far as I understand it, white people in California went, yeah, okay, well, let's institutionalize more affirmative action and government hiring and universities and things like that. We're fine with it, right? It turned out minorities voted against it in droves. So again, just as Trump managed to increase his vote and all the people that he's insulted during the election, right? Whether it's women, whether it's Latinos, whether it's African Americans, right? The same thing happens here, whereby the Democrats and all their allies get together and chuck tons of money at a proposition on something that they deeply care about. And then the people that are there meant to be represented are like, no thanks, we don't want this. We don't actually want this. And there's that disconnect again. So the Democrats are just, again, sort of intensely disappointing. You've got the fragilization of labor markets in one of the largest labor markets in the United States, sending a dangerous precedent while they're talking about we're going to rein in Google and all this sort of stuff. Bullshit. They just got to write their own labor law, right? On the other hand, what they really care about is a politics of inclusion and diversity, which their own base deeply cares about. But it seems that the people who they're selling this to, the people who are the targets of this inclusion and diversity, are actually rejecting it. What do you do with that info?
Well, I feel like a real heel now, having paid no attention to the affirmative action. But I think my first instinct is that people want to feel like they're getting ahead on their own merits, and that you don't want to think, oh, I got into Brown because I'm the one person from middle of nowhere with XYZ characteristics. But in fact, I got in because of my own intellectual power and all of that sort of stuff. And you don't want to be the one, oh, we know why she got in or she got the job or whatever that is.
But then there's another one as well, which is competition amongst minority groups themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, the Harvard lawsuit by Asian Americans, right? Essentially, their argument is, yeah, we're 6 or 7% of the population. We're about 20% of some school admissions. We should be 50%, given how well we perform. Why on earth would that group sign up to something that gives benefits to someone else that would take away their opportunities?
Right. Well, and that wraps around onto your point then. So if they give 50, if they are competing with Latinx and the African American community, will they actually get 50% or not? So is it the competition among those particular groups? I mean, right after 9/11, when there was all of the profiling going on of Arab Americans, I mean, African Americans were pretty quiet on that, and some cynics said, well, they were just happy that the spotlight wasn't on them anymore, at least for a little bit. So I mean, you do wonder the tension that exists between groups in terms of political power.
No, and again, my point in mentioning this, to circle back to the election, is the Democratic misreading of their public.
Yeah.
Right, I think it's just another example of this. Again, it's the election story was essentially, let's try and build a winning coalition by excluding the entire American white working class, and they just did it. But they did it by the thinnest of majorities in half a dozen states, because you're trying to exclude 80 million people from your coalition. Their electoral politics, I think, are not just fraught. I'm beginning to feel that they're fundamentally misguided.
Well,
it turns out the minorities can be conservative too. Imagine.
Yes. Well, and maybe that we have talked about in the past, that identity isn't just like, my racial identity isn't the thing that I think about most all the time every day, and that there's other stuff that I consider in my political calculus, economic calculus, etc. And I do wonder, to your point about the Democratic Party. I mean, I was listening to some end of the year stuff, and they said, President Trump did and said terrible things, but he also gave money to historically black colleges and universities in amounts that President Obama never did. And so he said and did lots of terrible stuff, but there's stuff that he actually did that weren't just empty words, but actually followed up on. There's follow through on things. So there's a little bit of that, I wonder, that's going on as well. That people are looking around and thinking, yeah, he said a lot of stuff, but he actually did some stuff that Democrats didn't do.
So push this forward a little bit. Now the Democrats are in power. They might even get Georgia and therefore get control of the Senate. At that point, what happens? What do they do? What do they effectively stand for? Right? You're relatively close to these people and what they're thinking. What's the plan? Because I don't really see one. I see sort of like, Trump's a bad person. Okay, so you've run on that. Turns out nobody really cared. You just about made it over the finish line. Trump's gone, right? Maybe. He still hasn't left yet. But, let's say he's gone. What's next? What exactly is the plan?
Well, this is such a good question, because even in the building of the COVID relief bill, I won't use the word stimulus. I mean, you had a core set of senators, Republicans and Democrats, that actually, and House members that worked on this thing over Zoom calls. According to the Washington Post, there was a 3-hour Zoom call where they just hacked at this thing and wrote the policy. And one of the congressmen said that he'd never been part of actually writing policy before. He'd just been part of the sort of political bickering. So there's that in that. So the point that I'm trying to make is that that even if Democrats pick up those Georgia seats, and I do not think that will happen, all the money that's being raised, I think, is really interesting. But we also saw in November that Democrats raised a shitload of money and they didn't win. That you actually are going to have a core set of senators work together to move things along. Whether they win or not, the margins are so slim for Republicans or Democrats that you have to move, in order to move things forward. You will have to have that core group. The House is harder to tell, because of course Democrats have the majority. But I think it's going to be really tough going for President Biden, unless he can work his magic in the Senate, because it doesn't appear as if Leader McConnell, who will likely still be leader, will give up any, will wheel and deal in the ways that a lot of Democrats are hoping for. So I don't think there is a plan. I think it's, to your point, like, bash on Trump, he's terrible. Probably that will go on for another, part of 2021. Look at all this. We're trying to undo all the terrible stuff. But I don't know that there's an overall big picture plan on how to actually move stuff along, because it touches on polarization and everyone hates everybody and on and on.
No, absolutely. So there's a weird sort of echo of 2016 here, in the sense that what you had with Senator Clinton's campaign was, it's my turn, right? There may be policies associated, but essentially, you guys get it, right? We're the technocrats. We understand how the world works. Trust us. After all, we oversaw Iraq, the financial crisis. Everything's going great, so vote for me. And Biden seems to be kind of like a throwback beyond even that, to a kind of world that simply doesn't exist in terms of the politics. there's a sort of a centre somewhere waiting to be found where we all agree on the right stuff, whatever that is. And if we just get in, we'll be fine. We'll stumble onto these, these things to do that will heal America. And I just don't see any content to this stuff.
Well, and Joe Biden is a weird president. I mean, if we were talking in 2016 and we talked about Joe Biden being the next president, I mean, he's just kind of a weird candidate for the times as well. Although, people are like, he's a moderate and blah, blah, blah. But I just don't see that. He just seems sort of like a placeholder. I mean, AOC recently said, we're not going back to brunch. And I think that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. But I think from the perspective of progressive politics, they're not going to, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is not just going to write him a blank check or a free pass or whatever and allow him to do what there's that infighting, I think, will become more intense.
And if they don't have a majority in Congress, then, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
you can do all the infighting you want, but you still can't pass anything, right? So there's that problem there. So which then pivots to sort of, when you see all the Biden appointments, I see John Kerry and people, all these people coming out of the woodwork, right? And this kind of, I was talking to my friend Matthias, who lives in DC, about this collective sigh of relief as all of the people who, run the foreign policy establishment are like, now we can get back to leading the world. And it's like, there's a new memo, and the memo says the rest of the world got on quite fine without you.
Yeah.
Right? There's this amazing sort of, you see it in the press all the time, in the mainstream press, just this sort of America's back, and, we're going to restore American leadership, and nobody's bothering to ask anyone if it's required.
Yeah.
Again, it's this throwback to, like, the indispensable nation. It's like, no, the EU managed to deal with the Brits quite well. We can get onto that in a minute. Russia still plays funny buggers and will continue to. China's set to overtake the US as the biggest economy in 3 years' time. And, eventually people will get tired of the dollar and tired of your polarization, and you'll eventually pay a price. So, what exactly is the leadership that you're offering us? Like a bigger navy? Nobody needs it. What are you for?
3 years, China will overtake the U.S.
The latest estimates.
Gee,
because
wow.
they didn't screw up. They didn't screw up COVID.
Yeah.
They invented it, but they didn't screw it up.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I just read this book about the China-Tibet relations and just thinking about China's how it is that they have total control over their country and their citizens, and just the wiping away of any different cultural norms and what it is that they want, and thinking about the Uyghurs as well, and then to think of them as being the most powerful economy. I mean, we'll be the tenants.
And, what will happen is the EU will do its usual thing. Will talk a good game on human rights and do absolutely nothing about it and continue to sell cars to the Chinese until they can make their own.
Yeah.
That's it. Right?
Yeah.
They will simply roll over and make a deal, right? So, in a sense, there is a case for American leadership if it means that you care about these liberal values, etc. But the extent to which the United States itself is a credible partner in any of these endeavors after the way that they behaved in Iraq and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Come on, forget it. Really?
Yeah,
nobody's buying this anymore. So there's an interesting post that I saw. I've been offline. I've been trying to just, tune out for a while.
I saw your tweet.
Yeah, no, it's like I need to get off. I'm breaking the rules for this, basically. But of course, for you. But anyway, where the hell was I going? Oh, yeah, that's it. So one of the guys, at least Lieutenant Colonel, I forget what his name is, he was one of the sort of the whistleblowers on Iraq. And the whole thing about the giant Russian hack, right? And he immediately says, "False flag. This is bullshit, right? This is all nonsense, right? They're just they're looking for a reason to go after Russia. This is WMD all over again." And I hadn't even thought of that, right? And then I stopped for a minute, and I thought, well, of course, because even if I don't believe that that's true, you've got record, right?
Yeah.
There's a track record of basically bullshitting your way into a war because you want one. Right? So why not actually be very, very skeptical of these claims again? And when it came out last week or whenever it was, I automatically took it as absolutely this is it. Russians are at it again. Bad, naughty Russians, right? And the Russians are like, honestly, lads, it's not us. And of course, yes, well, it's you and all the rest of it, right? And it's like, well, remember WMD? Yeah? Yeah. 45 minutes, all that bullshit.
Yep, yellow cake, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So these are the people that are coming back to restore leadership.
Yeah, they're the exact same people.
They're the exact people.
Yes, not even figuratively.
There's a reason that Trump was elected. Right?
Yes, yeah, because we don't. John Kerry, great senator, but maybe he just should retire. It doesn't need to be the climate czar. Yeah,
maybe they all should.
Yes.
I mean, for God's sake, the entire world is now run by, the American world is run by 80-year-olds.
Yes. Yes.
Enough.
Yep. Speaking of 80-year-olds, I mean, the UK has had a tough go of it over this year. I mean, Harry and Meghan, and now we're on to like super COVID, and like no one wants British citizens, and like those lines at the train stations. I mean, it's a tiny country.
I know, we've really managed to screw it up. So anyway, the great success that's Brexit, right? I mean, it's just awful, right? I mean, I'll break it down in the simplest possible terms, right? The United Kingdom has, like the United States, a huge trade deficit with the EU. They sell us stuff. I think it's something like 120 billion surplus in stuff, right? We don't make stuff. We do services. So we sell them about 50 billion in services. The agreement, this wonderful agreement that Boris has just done, marvellous agreement, right? That basically, it says no quotas, no tariffs on goods. So basically, the people who sell stuff to Britain just got a massive win, right? There is no agreement on services. That is pending, and that's everything that Britain sells to the EU. You just got screwed and you're pretending that it was awesome and it's the best thing ever because you won on fish. You managed to keep more herring that you don't eat. I mean, it's little, and you know, all the Brexit mob are like, we did it, we showed them, whatever. It's like, holy crap. And even if you take, you know, the better estimates of what this will cost, it's 4% of GDP over a 5-year period, whatever, right? It hurts, but it's not that bad. Well, the problem is, you know, those averages, as we know, are incredibly misleading. If you're a rich person living in London, then yeah, you'll pay a little bit more for your foie gras or whatever you're importing from France. Your life's not going to fundamentally change, right? If Nissan decides to shut up shop, the city of Sunderland closes down. You know, the very asymmetric the way that these costs will be distributed, and of course they're going to hit the communities that have suffered the most already. So, you know, this is, they've done themselves some damage. I read a great piece by an Irish bloke. I'll put it out on Twitter when I go back on next week. But it's this wonderful summary of the whole thing. And he basically says at the end of it, what you've really done is you've just made your life infinitely more complex. Because they're the elephant and you're the flea. And the elephant will continue to do things in the room and you will have to adjust to it. And what people don't really realize is once you've struck the deal, the negotiations are continuing because things change. And apparently if you get the Brexit document, the first 16 pages is just laying out all of these committees that need to be established and staffed on a full-time basis for actually implementing and monitoring these agreements, right?
Yeah.
So there's the equivalent of a Eurostar every day of British bureaucrats zipping off to Brussels just to keep this thing on track. Your transactions costs have just gone through the roof.
Yeah.
It's just, we've done brilliant. It's just like, oh, God almighty. I mean,
So
really.
Here's my philosophical question: in whatever future time period, is there Britain like the UK wants back in to the EU?
Yeah. I mean, there's a funny parallel to the United States here, right? So, you know, let's think about America's the indispensable nation and you know, the world needs American leadership. And of course, we're like, no, we don't. We're fine, right? Now, that's kind of the way that Britain found itself after World War II. So it fought 2 big wars. It was basically in hock to everybody, particularly India, who it tried to cheat on, and the United States in terms of volume terms through Lend-Lease. And it was trying to, you know, keep this imperial myth going, right? Blah, blah, blah. And then the Suez Crisis comes along. They get their ass kicked. The Americans do a run on the pound, and that's the end of that. There's no more imperial ambition. Decolonization follows almost instantly from that. And then basically there's this 10-year pivot where they try and figure out who they are. What do you want to be when you're a grown-up? And the answer was become a big player in Europe, right? That was the only other alternative there. So eventually in 1971, they joined the common market, which becomes the EU. And they've always had this kind of opt-out of the bits you don't like, as I used to describe it, the best deal ever, right? And then they decided they would have a better deal than the best deal ever, which of course you can't have, so you now have this idiotic Brexit agreement. And now they're basically on the outside, much, much more reduced again, looking in. Where to global Britain? Well, if the world doesn't give a shit about American leadership, they don't give a damn about global Britain. I mean, you're literally now a rounding error.
Yeah.
And by the time that the Scots are off and you get the final breakup of Britain and the reunification of Ireland, I mean, imagine that you were a Russian foreign policy hawk and you wanted to weaken your opponents. basically destroying the United Kingdom, the only nuclear power apart from the United States in Europe, right? The only one with a half-decent navy and a half-decent military would be a pretty amazing achievement, and yet they've managed to do it to themselves.
Right. Without any, with Russia really not having to do anything.
Oh, so we know. Who knows? I mean, apparently some of the Brexit money, well, it might have had Russian sources on it. Who knows?
Oh, geez. Well, that will be part of the HBO movie.
Yes,
When they do
absolutely. With
part
Benedict
2 of it.
Cumberbatch
Yes.
playing everyone again. It would just be Benedict.
Seriously.
He will play everyone. That's it. Just one actor, and he'll play everyone. He'll be brilliant at all of them.
Well, on that point, as we start to wrap things up, we can end on the classic, like TV, book, movie, etc. Recommendations, or anything that has added some levity or comfort during COVID, in terms of the books, movies, etc. Do you have any recommendations?
I still haven't finished The Crown. I'm still in season 4. The weird thing about being in season 4 is I actually remember those events, right?
Oh,
I mean, it may
yeah.
have been, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And that makes it weird in a sense that I loved the second season because it was all these little moments in British history that you've read about but you didn't experience. The Profumo scandal, the whole, what was the story here? About Johnson basically being charmed by Princess Margaret, all this nonsense, right? And that was thoroughly enjoyable and getting into aspects that you didn't really hear a lot about. But now you're getting into this, it's the Diana fest. It's Diana and Thatcher and the Queen. It's the three crazy women triangle, right?
Right, yeah.
And they're just playing that over and over in a loop. And that was, in a sense, when I grew up. So it's very weird watching that. And there's a big debate in Britain about, well, it's not authentic, and they're saying all these things, and none of it happened and all that. I totally believe that Diana basically roller skated through the palace telling everyone to go get lost.
Yeah.
I think that's entirely plausible. No, other things. I mentioned a few of them.
Did you
go
watch?
ahead.
Are you watching The Mandalorian, or did you watch The Mandalorian?
Oh, I watched The Mandalorian. Yes, I did. Sergio Leone in space.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, for nostalgic purposes, but mostly. But I also liked it because it was a very simple. There's no complicated plot like Game of Thrones. I couldn't keep track of everybody, and it was just super
Right.
simple. Things wrapped up at the end of 30 minutes. I could just leave it and not.
And you can always wrap up an episode just by saying, "This is the way."
Yeah.
That was it. This is the way. It is the way. Okay, fine. That's that. No more. Is it? Can we do this? Is it the way? It's the way. Right. That's it. So yeah, that was good.
Yeah, really like that. And then I guess was my big thing over the last couple of weeks is binging Mandalorian. I have not watched The Crown. I find The Crown to be kind of slow, and it's hard for me to invest in the characters, and I guess I should I watched, I think, the second or the third season, but it's just, I don't know, there's something about it that was just, I needed maybe more shooting or something.
There's something interesting that they do. The first 2 seasons makes you like them. You begin to realize that they're in a kind of impossible position, right? They are who they are. They are themselves an institution. The rules don't apply to them, but there are other strictures in their lives that means that they're, in a sense, they're puppets on a stage. And then what you start to get as you move further into the 1980s is you begin to hate them. You begin to realize that they're just contemptuous, horrible people. And it would be interesting to see, where this goes from here, because they're going to do more. I don't know how far they're going to take it up, but apparently they're going to do 6 seasons now. So I don't know. We might even get to Harry and Meghan time. Who knows?
If they had more blasters, maybe, and Tusken Raiders, I might be more into it. Maybe it's a little bit more action.
The Good Omens was good. The BBC 6-part series.
Oh,
on the Pratchett novel. That's really good. It has Michael Sheen and what's his name again? David Tennant.
Oh, okay.
The 2 actors in it.
Okay.
You'd really like it. That one's really cool. I'm gearing up finally to watch Succession.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good one.
Right. So I don't know if I mentioned this. My brother, Laurie, who lives in New Zealand, went to school with the main actor.
Oh, the son.
Brian Cox. No, Brian Cox. No, the old
dad.
Guy. Yeah, the dad. Yeah, he went to school. My brother's pretty old, but I'm pretty old. But he went to school with Brian Cox, And so there was that, and then there's an episode actually. They set up the character so he comes from Dundee, my hometown. I didn't really realise this. And there's an episode in the second season called Dundee, about him going home to Dundee. And I asked a friend of mine who watched it, I said, is this worth watching? And he says, look, I've been telling you from the start, watch this. Because this guy is basically a billionaire from Dundee who happens to live in America. That's all you need to know. And I was like, okay, I'm in. We're going to do it.
Yeah, I thought that was a great show, so I'll be curious about about what you think of it.
Exactly. Oh, did you watch Wonder Woman 84?
I did watch it. Did you?
Of course I did, because you're in lockdown. There's nothing else to do, and it's on a platform. Yeah. How, out of 10, what would you give it?
Well, I found it very entertaining, but I mean, there's so many plot holes. So if I, really think about it too hard, that it becomes crap. But if I just just watched it without thinking, I thought it was pretty good. So maybe 8.
Yeah, I'd give it that as well. So I did something interesting. I encourage viewers to do this as well, or listeners, and see if you get the same thing. Go back and watch some classic 80s movies, right? So, of course, the new Christmas movie is now no longer It's a Wonderful Life, it's Die Hard, right? Which really works for a variety of reasons. It's the best Christmas movie, right? But we decided to go watch, you ready? Beverly Hills Cop.
No.
Now,
I haven't watched
here's the
that
thing. When
forever.
Beverly Hills Cop came out, this was huge, right? And I remember thinking it was the coolest, the funniest, the most amazing, totally brilliant. You watch it these days, you're like, oh my God, this is flat and lame. Right? We have just moved on so far. They're like, wow, that was cutting edge. The knife must have been really blunt.
Right. Well, I'm gonna go back and watch Beverly Hills Cop because I got stuck in Love Actually imagining Hugh Grant as Prime Minister.
Yes. Yeah, that's the other awful Christmas alternative. Yes, Love Actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
right.
Any New Year's resolutions?
Yes. I'm going to. I built a gym over Christmas.
Oh, holy cow! Okay.
Yeah, with a lifting rack.
Okay.
So it's serious. Because basically I was just getting fat and lardy and drinking too much. So I do this every year. Basically, I do have a kind of like detox cleanse period. But this year I'm going to see how long I can really keep it going. And I need to. My back actually hurts a lot. This has been the real casualty of COVID. I'm like an old man complaining about back pain, but I've got a screwed up back, and part of the reason is I no longer have a standing desk.
Oh.
Right?
Oh, right.
Because at work I always had a standing desk, right? So you're constantly, your posture's good, the whole lot. And I've been working like long hours, like everybody else, from a seated desk, right? And my gym's closed.
Oh,
So basically, my back and my posture's just gone. So I need to fix it. That's basically it.
Yeah. Oh, I saw your star turn in the Big Brown video. You teaching, and it was nice to see you in the classroom. And then
yes, with a face mask on, exactly.
Yeah,
all masked up. We were continuing face to face.
Yes.
They found one person who was daft enough to teach face to face during a pandemic, and it was me.
Well, thank you all for listening. Happy New Year, and we'll be back. Be back at this soon.
We'll be back in 2021 to explore the dynamics of American leadership that nobody wants. Life after Trump. There is no life after Trump. He will still be around.
Yeah.
And basically the Democrats not really deciding what they want to do when they become grown-ups. That's pretty much it.
Right. And a non-global Britain. Britain that
yes,
no one
that's
actually
it.
wants
That's
either.
it. But
Yeah.
now we'll see all those trade deals they will sign with Mesopotamia and the
Yes.
Nile Delta.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.